Everyone said the husky was just being a husky. Everyone was explaining the wrong thing. The sound came at 4:47 in the morning. Not the baby's cry. Jonah had heard that enough to hear it through walls, through sleep, through the specific fog of a new parent in month 8. This was something underneath it, a second sound, lower, joining the first the way an instrument joins a chord. He lay there for 3 seconds processing, and then he was up. Nova was a 2-year-old Siberian husky who had come to them 1 year before their son Finn arrived. Silver and white, pale blue eyes, the disposition of an animal that had opinions about everything, and the vocal range to express all of them. Jonah and his wife Darcy had been told, huskies are dramatic. Huskies vocalize. They sing. They argue. They perform. They had laughed about this. They had video of Nova howling at the smoke alarm. They were prepared for drama. This was not that sound. He found Nova in Finn's room at the crib rail, her muzzle pressed through the slats, not touching the baby, just close, her breath moving the baby's hair. And she was making a sound that came from somewhere deep in her chest. Not a howl, not a bark, something sustained and low and continuous that vibrated in the air. Finn was crying, not his normal cry. Jonah reached into the crib and lifted him and felt the weight of him, and something was wrong with the weight. Not wrong like something had happened. Wrong like something was happening, quietly underneath. He checked his temperature. 97.8. Not high. He bounced him. Finn stopped crying. Nova did not stop making the sound. She followed Jonah out of the nursery and down the hall and into the bedroom, where Darcy was now awake, and sat in the doorway of the bedroom and continued to make that sound, with the specific focus of something that has decided this is the job, and it is not finished yet. Darcy was a registered respiratory therapist. She listened to that sound for about 45 seconds, and then she said, "She's not being dramatic. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one." They tried to get Nova to lie down. She stood. They put Finn in the bassinet beside the bed. Nova stood at the side of it and looked at Finn and looked at them and made the sound unbroken for 6 more minutes. Then Finn's breathing changed, not dramatically, not the stop-start of something terrible. A change in rhythm, a slight quickening, a slight shallowing, the kind that only years of listening to breath would catch. Darcy caught it. She said his name once, then pulled the pulse oximeter from the nightstand drawer. She kept one for professional reasons, and clipped it to Finn's finger. The reading came back at 91. Normal infant oxygen saturation is 97 to 100. At 91, the brain is receiving less oxygen than it needs. At 89, it becomes a medical emergency. She picked Finn up. She told Jonah to drive. She said go, and he went. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The emergency pediatrician at the hospital was Dr. Fernanda Okafor. She had spent 14 years in pediatric emergency medicine. She assessed Finn in under 3 minutes, ordered imaging, and came back to them with the word bronchiolitis, a viral inflammation of the small airways in the lungs. She said it progresses silently in infants. She said the oxygen saturation drops gradually, slowly enough that a sleeping parent wouldn't notice. She said, most infants who come in with this come in because a monitor alarmed or because a parent happened to check. She looked at Darcy. She said, you work in respiratory. What made you check? Darcy said, the dog. There was a pause. Dr. Okafor said, that's not the first time I've heard that. What Nova was responding to was the change in Finn's respiratory pattern, the increase in rate, the shift in the sound of his breathing, the subtle alteration in the chemical composition of air exhaled by a baby whose small airways were inflamed and working harder than they should. A husky's hearing range extends well above the human frequency ceiling. Their olfactory sensitivity to respiratory chemistry, to the volatile organic compounds present in breath during pulmonary distress, is documented in research on detection animals trained for exactly this purpose. Nova had no training. She had 8 months of living beside a baby whose breathing she had been cataloging without anyone knowing since the day he came home. The sound she was making was the only alarm in that house that worked. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Finn was admitted for 48 hours. He came home on oxygen support that was removed after 4 days. Nova met him at the door with the contained intensity of an animal that has been waiting for a specific thing to resolve, and now sees that it has. She pressed her nose briefly to his face, 1 breath, 2, and then walked back to her bed in the kitchen and lay down. Jonah stood in the hallway watching her do that. He thought about the 6 minutes she had stood in the bedroom doorway making that sound that nobody recognized because they had never heard it before. He thought about how he'd almost closed the bedroom door. The next story involves a dog who refused to let a toddler near the kitchen for 4 consecutive mornings, and what was in the air above the stove that no human could detect. Nova lay in her bed in the kitchen and watched Finn sleep in his bouncy chair 3 feet away, her pale blue eyes open, tracking every small rise and fall of his chest. Still listening, still cataloging the way she had been from the very beginning.